There is a name for the kind of childhood that looked like independence but felt like abandonment. For the competence that was never a gift, it was an emergency. They were praised for being mature, for being self-sufficient, for holding it together, and something in them flinched at every compliment. There is a reason for that flinch, and it explains more than they realize. There is a specific kind of competence that unsettles people without them knowing why. You can see it in the person who navigates crisis with eerie calm, the one who anticipates needs before they are spoken, who learned to read a room the way a sailor reads the sky, not for wonder, but for survival. Their composure is not confidence. It is the residue of a childhood spent translating chaos into order, danger into safety, absence into presence. They learned early that no one was coming, so they became the one who came. This is not about maturity, this is about theft. The child who raised themselves does not remember learning to cook. They remember the hunger that taught them. They do not remember choosing responsibility. They remember the silence after their parents' bedroom door closed at 2 in the afternoon, and the understanding that someone had to remain functional. They learned to forge permission slips, to lie to teachers about why the rent check bounced, to speak to their younger siblings in the soft voice their mother used to use before the medication stopped working. They became fluent in a language children should never have to speak, the language of holding things together when the adults have let go. Psychologists call this parentification. The term, coined by family therapist Ivan Bosomenyi-Nagy, describes the process by which a child is enlisted, implicitly or explicitly, to function as a parent within their own family system. It occurs in 2 forms. Instrumental parentification assigns the child practical responsibilities: cooking, cleaning, childcare, managing finances. Emotional parentification is more insidious. The child becomes the regulator of the parent's emotional state, the confidant, the mediator, the one who absorbs the adult's anxiety so the adult does not have to hold it themselves. Both forms share a common architecture, the inversion of the natural order. The child becomes the caretaker, the adult becomes the one who is cared for, and the child, because they are still a child, believes this is love. The origin is often invisible to outsiders. The family may look intact. There may be no overt abuse, no obvious neglect. The parent may be present in body, absent in capacity. Depression that swallows the adult whole. Addiction that turns them into a ghost who still occupies space. Chronic illness that rewrites the family's emotional architecture. Divorce that leaves the remaining parent too shattered to function. Sometimes it is simply the mathematics of poverty. 2 jobs, no time, a child who learns that making themselves useful is the only way to make themselves safe. The child does not choose this role. The child inherits it the way one inherits eye color or bone structure. Silently, inevitably. What makes parentification so psychologically corrosive is that it weaponizes the child's own competence against them. The child who successfully manages the household, who keeps their siblings fed, who learns to de-escalate their parents' rage or despair, receives intermittent reinforcement for this role. Praise, when it comes, is always conditional. You are so mature for your age. I do not know what I would do without you. You are the only one who understands. And the child, whose nervous system is wired to attach, to please, to secure the parent's presence, learns that their value is functional. They are loved not for who they are, but for what they provide. This is the blueprint. and it does not fade when childhood ends. The cost reveals itself slowly, the way structural damage does. The adult who was once the parentified child carries hypervigilance like a second skeleton. Their nervous system never recalibrated. They scan every room for instability. They monitor the emotional states of everyone around them, not because they want to, but because the monitoring was once what kept them alive. Trauma rewires the brain's threat detection systems, but parentification does something additional. It trains the child to perceive other people's needs as emergencies. The distinction between care and compulsion dissolves. They do not know how to receive care. When someone offers help, their first instinct is suspicion. What do you need from me in return? When someone expresses affection without asking for anything, they wait for the bill. Intimacy becomes unbearable because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires the belief that someone will catch you if you fall, but they learned early that no one catches. So they remain standing even when their legs give out, even when rest is what they need most. Their relationships repeat the pattern. They are drawn again and again to people who need saving. The partner who cannot regulate their own emotions, the friend who calls only in crisis, the co-worker who leans until leaning becomes collapsing, and the child, now adult, steps in because stepping in is what they know. Because on some unconscious level, they believe that if they can finally fix someone, they will retroactively fix the parent who could not be fixed. They will prove that their competence was worth something, that the childhood they sacrificed was not wasted. But it does not work. It never works. Because the people they try to save are not their parents. And even if they were, you cannot heal a wound by reopening it in a different body. The exhaustion is cellular. They have been holding the world upright since they were 7, and their arms are tired, but they do not know how to put it down. Rest feels like failure. Stillness feels like abandonment. They have internalized the belief that their worth is proportional to their utility, and so they work and plan and manage and fix until their own needs become unrecognizable background noise. They are the last to eat, the last to sleep, the last to ask for anything, because asking was never safe. The turning point, when it comes, is rarely dramatic. It is not an epiphany. It is a small, unbearable moment of recognition. Perhaps they are at a family gathering, watching their younger sibling's child run to their parent with a scraped knee, and they realize they never did that. They never believed anyone would come. Perhaps they are in a relationship, and their partner says, "You do not have to earn this," and the sentence lands like a foreign language. Perhaps they are alone in their apartment, 38 years old, and they realize they are still trying to be good enough to deserve the childhood that was already taken. The shift is not in deciding to change. The shift is in recognizing that the role was never theirs to carry. That the parentification was not their failure. It was an imposition, a theft. And the competence they built, the hyper-responsibility, the emotional fluency, the ability to hold 6 crises at once without flinching, was not a gift. It was a survival strategy. And survival strategies, no matter how effective, are not identities. They are scaffolding. And scaffolding can be dismantled. This does not mean the skills disappear. It means they stop being compulsory. The person begins to notice the difference between care that flows from choice and care that flows from terror. They begin to see that they are allowed to have needs, that their presence is not conditional on their usefulness, that they are allowed to be the one who is held, fed, soothed, that they are allowed to stop. Consider the parentified adult in a romantic relationship. Their partner is upset. Not crisis-level upset, but troubled. A bad day at work. A frustration with a friend. The parentified adult's nervous system immediately shifts into problem-solving mode. What can I do? How can I fix this? What do you need from me? They do not recognize this as hypervigilance. They believe this is intimacy. But the partner does not need a manager. The partner needs a companion. And the parentified adult, who was trained to be useful rather than present, cannot distinguish between the two, or watch them in the workplace. They take on the tasks no one else will touch. They stay late. They absorb the anxiety of their colleagues, the frustration of their manager, the chaos of disorganization. They do this not because they are ambitious, but because they are wired to prevent collapse. And when they burn out, and they will burn out, they will blame themselves. They will think they were not competent enough, when the truth is, they were too competent. They were so competent that everyone around them learned to rely on them, and the reliance became expectation, and the expectation became entitlement. And no one, including them, noticed when care became extraction. Or picture them at the family gathering. Their siblings have their own lives now, their own families. The parent who was once incapable has perhaps stabilized or has not. But the parentified adult still arrives early, still sets the table, still mediates the tension, still becomes the shock absorber for everyone else's discomfort. And when they leave, hours later, they feel the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical labor, but from the sustained performance of holding a role that was never supposed to be theirs. And they wonder why no one asks how they are doing. And then they remember, because they never taught anyone to ask. Here is what they deserve to hear, and what no one likely said. You were not responsible for your parents' well-being. You were not responsible for keeping the family intact. You were not responsible for managing anyone's emotions but your own, and you were too young to even do that. The fact that you survived does not mean the situation was survivable. The fact that you became competent does not mean the competence was fair. You were a child, and you deserved to be cared for, not to be the one doing the caring. The parentified adult often struggles with this reframing because it feels like a betrayal. To accept that they were harmed is to accept that their parent failed them. And the child who raised themselves learned long ago that they could not afford to see their parent clearly, because to see clearly was to see the absence, and the absence was unbearable. So they constructed a story in which their competence was voluntary, in which they were simply mature, simply helpful, simply good. And this story protected them for a time, but the story is no longer serving them. The story is a cage. The parentified child builds a false self of hyper-competence, hyper-responsibility, hyper-attunement. This false self is not a lie. It is functional. It kept them alive, but it is not who they are. And part of the work, the hard, uncomfortable, necessary work, is learning to distinguish between the self that was built for survival and the self that wants to emerge now that survival is no longer the only goal. This does not mean they discard their competence. It means they stop using competence as a shield against vulnerability. It means they learn that they are allowed to be uncertain, to be imperfect, to be the one who does not have the answer. It means they practice, slowly and with great difficulty, the art of receiving, of letting someone else cook the meal, of letting someone else hold the plan, of letting someone else be strong so they can finally rest. There is a moment in therapy, or in deep conversation, or in the solitary work of self-reflection, when the parentified adult begins to grieve, not for what happened, but for what did not, for the childhood that could have been, for the version of themselves who was allowed to be careless, irresponsible, young, who made messes and knew someone would clean them up, who cried and knew someone would come, who did not have to be the adult in the room because there was already an adult in the room. That grief is holy. That grief is the beginning. Because once they grieve, they can begin to choose. They can begin to notice when they are slipping into the old role, not because the role is needed, but because the role is familiar. They can begin to ask themselves, am I doing this because I want to, or because I am afraid of what happens if I do not? They can begin to set boundaries that feel, at first, like cruelty, but are actually just the reassertion of the natural order. They can begin to say, I am not available to manage your emotions. I am not available to fix your life. I am not available to be your parent. And they can say this with love, because love does not require self-abandonment. They can begin to notice what it feels like to be young. Not literally young, age is not reversible, but psychologically young, to be playful, to be irresponsible for an afternoon, to waste time, to let someone else lead, to trust that if they stop holding everything together, the world will not collapse. Or if it does, it was not theirs to hold in the first place. This is not a prescription. This is not a 5-step process. This is recognition. The child who raised themselves did so because they had to, but they do not have to anymore, and the competence they carry, the extraordinary, hard-won, exhausting competence, can now be a choice rather than a cage. They can choose when to offer it. They can choose when to withhold it. They can choose to be the one who is cared for, even if that choice feels like falling. So if you recognize yourself in this, if you have spent years being the one who holds everything together, here is your permission. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be the one who is cared for. The childhood you lost cannot be returned, but the burden you carry can finally be put down. If this shifted something for you, subscribing and liking genuinely helps this work reach the people who need it. Thank you for your support. If you are watching this and your chest tightened somewhere along the way, you know why you are here. Leave a single word in the comments. Held. Those who know will know.